Richard Wells stood on the 34th floor of Landsmark Properties, gazing out at the Boston skyline below. He was new to the city. He had arrived just 6 months ago from a small town no one here could pronounce. His suit was second-hand. His shoes were cracked, but polished. His accent was soft with traces of the South. In an office full of glossy resumes and elite business degrees, Richard was invisible. At least in the beginning, he started with the smallest leads. Clients others ignored, listings that had sat untouched for weeks. But slowly Richard turned them into deals, modest wins. One by one, nothing flashy, but consistent. He stayed late every night, studied market trends, took handwritten notes, followed up with every client like it was personal. By the 3rd month, Richard had reached his target. By the 4th, he had doubled it. People started whispering his name, but not all whispers were kind. Michelle, the head of marketing, had been with Landsmark for 7 years. She was polished, respected, and territorial. Her campaigns were bold, her strategies flashy, and her presence unmissable. She wore designer shoes, carried a scent of authority, and disliked anything that didn't fit her aesthetic. Richard didn't. She noticed the congratulations he received. The quiet nods from Mr. Grant, the departmental head, the smiles from clients. And she hated it. She began her work in silence. One day, Richard was removed from a shared marketing project without explanation. Another day, a client lead he had been nurturing was handed to someone else. Meetings he was meant to join were rescheduled without him. It was all subtle, professional, undeniable. Daniel, the sales head, played both sides. He smiled at Richard in front of others, but in meetings with Michelle, he rolled his eyes. He once joked that Richard still looked like he walked to work from a farm. Everyone laughed, except Ava, the quiet HR manager, who watched more than she spoke. Richard said nothing. He continued working, continued closing deals. But slowly his world inside the office began to shrink. The window desk that had been promised to him after his 5th straight successful month was suddenly reassigned. Michelle said it was a branding choice. Daniel said it was temporary. Mr. Grant remained silent. One evening, Richard stayed late finishing a proposal. He had worked on it for weeks. Data projections, location analytics, pricing models, it was airtight. The next morning, it was gone from the system, deleted. Michelle said there had been a server crash. But only Richard's file was lost. He sat in the break room that day, lunch untouched. Fingers locked together, head bowed. Ava walked in, stood beside him, and whispered, "You know what they're doing, don't you?" He nodded. "Then why are you still here?" "Because I've got no one to run." Tuva didn't speak again, but her eyes softened. The days that followed were harder. Richard's efforts were constantly undermined. A lead he secured was redirected to another executive. His name was left out of a campaign he had suggested. In one meeting, Michelle said, "In front of everyone, clients want sharp energy, polished reps, and presence. Not a man who looks like he belongs at a farmer's market." No one laughed. But no one defended him either. That night, Richard went home and looked in the mirror for a long time. He thought about resigning, about giving up. He even opened the email draft, but he didn't send it. Instead, he went through old files, client lists from months ago. One name caught his eye. A property investor group from Dubai. Their contact had been labeled low priority and marked for no follow-up. Michelle had written that herself. But Richard remembered something. The brief call. A soft-spoken man who had asked about commercial land near South Boston. He reached out. Within a week, Richard had secured a video call. Then another. He prepared a proposal alone. Worked late at night. No emails, no system files. Just his laptop and his living room floor. He didn't trust anyone anymore. The proposal was for a $22 million commercial land development. Accepted. It would be Landsmark's biggest deal of the year. On the day of the investor's arrival, Michelle tried to take the lead. She called Daniel into a private meeting, claimed she had revived the dormant client, tried to hijack the deal, but Ava stepped in. She showed the board Richard's communication logs, the dates the calls were made, the files he created, the pitch he delivered alone. Silence fell over the room. Daniel looked embarrassed. Michelle's lips tightened. Mr. Grant looked ashamed. "Why didn't you bring this to us earlier?" he asked quietly. Richard looked up and said, "Because I learned my place here." It wasn't in this room. 2 hours later, the deal closed. That night, Richard cleared his desk. No speech. No announcement. Just a quiet nod to Ava, who stood at the corner watching him. Mr. Grant followed him to the elevator. "You deserved better," Richard smiled. "I know," and then he was gone. 5 years later, a new building opened in Boston's financial district. Sleek black glass, curved architecture, and a golden sign on top that read, "The Richard Wells Group." Inside, Richard wore a sharp gray suit and carried no trace of the man they once ignored. His company worked with clients across 3 countries. His team was filled with people from small towns, overlooked resumes, quiet voices. He hired Ava as his head of people. Mr. Grant joined as a senior consultant. One afternoon, a resume landed on his desk. Michelle Harper. Seeking senior marketing position, he closed the file and placed it in the bin. As he stared out the window at the city that once rejected him, he smiled and thought, the deal they tried to break becomes the one that breaks them. He wasn't just a deal maker, he was the deal breaker.